All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Pre-Medical and Pre-Dental Advising Office, a group advising session. This will be our fourth and final live event of the semester, but you can always find the videos for both today's presentation and our past ones up on our website whenever you need to go back. All right, my name is Krista. I will actually let Dr. Sanford introduce himself now as well before we get started.
So thank you, Krista, and welcome everybody. I hope everybody's surviving well under the circumstances in which we have to operate and in which we have to study these days, and that everybody's doing well and the semester's going well for you. So thank you for joining. Happy through this modality to try to give you all the information that you basically are going to require and need to think about as you progress in your studies and progress, toward the eventual application to professional school. So welcome aboard.
All right, so this presentation today is intended for anyone who's new to a pre-medical or pre-dental track at UConn, whether you're a freshman or someone who's recently decided to pursue this track of study. Here's our agenda for this morning. So first, we're going to begin by talking a little bit about who we are, what our office actually does, some of the resources we have available, and then we're going to dive into the different aspects that go into the holistic admissions review process used at medical and dental schools. So that includes things such as academic metrics, experiential components, and the 15 core competencies. And we'll also wrap up by sharing some of the resources from the official advising application services as well as UConn specific things. So first of all, you can find our contact info at the bottom there. Our website, premed.uconn.edu, has a great amount of information, including the coursework chart we're going to take a look at together. And we do record videos of all of our workshops, including these group advising sessions, stick them up there as soon as we can. We do have an Instagram account, which we post on very regularly about upcoming events and opportunities. And then finally, normally we are physically located on the 4th floor of the Rowe building in campus. It's a very centrally located building, so be sure to swing by whenever we're able to be back on campus. So we like to begin by just orienting you in terms of where we actually fit in the overall university plan. So the Pre-Medical Pre-Dental Advising Office is part of the Office of Pre-Professional Advising, which is in itself one of the 6 subunits under the Enrichment Programs Department. So enrichment programs are open to any undergraduate of any plan of study, any UConn campus, and they offer opportunities for undergraduates to really enhance and enrich their undergraduate experiences. So you can see some of our sister units, if you will, listed on this page here, including things such as the Honors Program, Individualized Major Program, National Scholarships Fellowships, as well as Undergraduate Research and the University Scholar Program. So if you're curious about learning more about these programs, please check out the website. We do work very closely with staff from all of these units as well. And just as an example of one way you can really maximize your enrichment opportunities at UConn, this is one of our recent graduates, Akshaya, who somehow managed to touch, I think, almost all 6 of these different areas. She was a STEM scholar in the Honors Program. She designed her own individualized major, actually, in health policy and social medicine. Very cool interdisciplinary plan of study. She won grants from the Office of Undergraduate Research, as well as some very important national scholarships. And she's actually a current applicant to medical school as she completes a master's degree abroad. So again, just one way that you can really pursue your interests and let enrichment programs help you along that way. In terms of who we are, so beginning at the top there, Dr. Erin Ciaramboli is our Director of Pre-Professional Advising. She joined us in May and is helping to shape the pathways of advising in the years to come. On the pre-medical side of things, we have Dr. Keith Sanford joining us today, who was Associate Dean of Admissions at UConn Med for over 30 years. So we're very happy to have him now on this end of the pipeline working with undergraduates. Kalaya Arrington is a PhD student in educational psychology with a focus on social justice and creativity in education. She is also doing pre-medical advising as well as working very closely with our Rowe Scholars program of students. On the pre-dental side of things, we have Dr. Thomas Abbott, who you might recognize, even if you're not pre-dental, as one of the main core instructors of Biology 1107, kind of a rite of passage for many pre-med and pre-dent students. I'm Krista. I'm a program coordinator for the department. I also do pre-medical advising as well as coordinate our annual composite letter process, which you'll hear more about in a moment. Sue Ruggiero provides administrative support to our unit. She also works very closely with our post-bac population to register for them for courses every semester. So these are the names you'll most likely see when interacting with our office. So to take care of a couple basic housekeeping things, one of the questions we always get at the beginning is, what do I have to do to become pre-med or pre-dent at UConn? The simple answer is there is no application or formal sign-up. So there's no official system designation that you have to complete or fill out. Rather, the most important thing is just to reach out to us. If you have not already, please email us at premed_predental@uconn.edu and request to be added to our emailing list. I can't underscore the importance of this enough. We do send out a weekly newsletter with different events and opportunities and oftentimes job positions as well. But all of the information about applying for each upcoming application cycle and all of our resources and workshops is communicated via that list. So if you take away anything from today, please just make sure you email us and get on that list. In terms of what our office actually does, so the bulk of our time is spent on advising, and I do think it's important to make it very clear from the start, you are welcome to seek us out for advising your very first week of college through after you graduate. So we work with alumni on a weekly, I would even say daily basis, because it's becoming even more common these days for people to take a little additional time, take a growth year or two, and really cultivate your candidacy before applying to medical or dental school. So you're always welcome to reach back out to us even after you graduate for both advising and to kick off the application process related things. I will mention that we do have a post-bac program here at UConn as well. This is a certificate program offered through the graduate school and is intended for students who either decided a little too late to pursue the pre-medical or pre-dental track and so need to fulfill their prerequisite entrance requirements, and or students who want to really enhance courses they've already taken, maybe fill in some gaps, and strengthen their undergraduate GPAs before applying. So you can find out more information about that particular program on our website as well. In terms of advising itself, so we do offer these group advising sessions a few times per semester. And then we also offer a series of workshops throughout the year, which are geared towards mainly the application process itself. So the biggest one to take note of is our annual application orientation that typically takes place every February, early February, and is intended for any upcoming applicants in that summer. So we lay out everything you need to know about what the different application processes are, the different components of a complete application, what is the timeline like for applying, as well as more test-specific things, and then the whole process for obtaining a composite letter from our office. That workshop is really the big one. It's kind of our big kickoff event every year, and we follow that up with more specific workshops geared towards specific elements of the application process, such as personal statements, secondaries, how to select schools to apply to, as well as interviewing workshops, which we do in collaboration with the Center for Career Development. So at this point, you've heard me mention this thing called a composite letter. It's also called a committee letter a couple times. Dr. Sanford, would you like to introduce what that's all about?
Sure, happy to, Krista. The years that I worked at the medical school in medical school admissions, it was very apparent to us as an admissions committee the value of having a more comprehensive statement of a student's progress and readiness for moving on to their professional career. And that's sort of the main objective of a school when it opts to provide a very comprehensive statement of your sort of suitability and readiness to move to the next level, which concentrates on a lot of different aspects about you. First, a little bit of biography that's unique and interesting to admissions committees for you individually, Second, it covers very carefully the sources and influences on your motivation to proceed in this direction, highlights any unique academic aspects of your candidacy, covers the extent and involvement that you've had in terms of getting clinical exposure, both through some shadowing, virtual shadowing these days, and any direct patient care activities that you may have pursued. Gets into talking about research. Schools do not necessarily have a requirement for research, but it always serves as a plus, and it's a unique strength of the University of Connecticut that we hope many of you will certainly engage as you progress in your undergraduate studies. Other things, schools are very interested these days in the extent of your engagement and fulfillment you've derived in terms of your service to others. So they look very carefully and record very carefully the things that you've been involved with, the number of hours, any leadership roles that have been identified, whether this was kind of a short-term or a long-term engagement. But they really want to know what motivates you to pursue a health professions career, with an eye toward having invested a good deal of your time in effort in serving others. So so the bottom line thing they're looking for is a certain amount of sort of internal satisfaction and that you get from just being in a position of helping others. And this sort of basic altruism that is important to you and how it's played out in terms of things that you've chosen to engage yourself in. One of the things you'll hear along the way is, one thing you want to, you will certainly want to explore various things available to you, and there's a lot available to you within the university system, certainly and outside, but often a more intense involvement in a couple of different areas carries a lot more value to admissions committees than some short-term kinds of engagement. So bottom line is to be thinking about what you really enjoy in terms of your clubs and your other interactions and commitments that you make, with an eye towards sort of centering on some where you feel you can make the most contribution and the most impact in realizing this sort of internal need you have for service to others. Finally, schools like to see some array of different extracurricular involvement. Krista kids me, one of my favorite sayings is they're interested in interesting people. So to prepare to go on to professional school, doesn't mean you have to give up a lot of sort of personal interests and activities. You do have to be careful, and you do have to be able to manage your time well to accomplish all that you want to do. But, the long and short of this sort of brief comment about the composite letter is the composite letter really tries to capture all these elements for you and present a very comprehensive picture. And from an admissions committee's member perspective, as they review files, from an interviewer's perspective, to have a more and fuller presentation of the things you've been involved with, rather than to rely just on individual statements from 3 or 4 people, is something that's quite valuable to admissions committees. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Sanford. And indeed, normally I hear him saying a few times per day, med schools are looking for exciting people. We've had a couple alumni panels recently as well, and every single one of them have just said, I wish I really pursued activities or things that were more meaningful to me during my time as an undergrad. Because the med schools also want to know what makes you excited as a person to create a class of diverse people with diverse interests.
Krista, not hearing you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, thank you. um, okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. So now that you've attended a group advising session, at any point you can request an appointment through our website. If you're pre-medical, then you can go on and just fill out the appropriate appointment request form. If you're pre-dental, you can actually schedule the appointment yourself with Dr. Abbott at nexus.uconn.edu. So please note for this semester, and it's looking very likely for the spring as well, that all appointments will be conducted virtually. However, after this, whenever we're all back in the office, please make sure to swing by our office because we have plenty of stress balls and highlighters and some other little swag things that you can take. Okay, now we're getting ready to transition now into talking a little bit more about the holistic admissions. So to introduce this topic, I'd like to begin with just these three common misconceptions about being pre-med or pre-dent. So first of all, there tends to be this idea or misconception that UConn, for example, has a pre-med or pre-dent major, which is not the case at all. Rather, you major in whatever you're most intrinsically interested in, and then you do have to complete a certain set of entrance requirements along the way and demonstrate strength in the sciences. So more on that in a minute. Second, if you don't start in your first year, it's too late. That is not the case at all. We do hope we have some students of all different semesters joining us today. And a lot of students will realize this is the correct career path for them after they've taken a little time and really explored some different options. Finally, professional school admission is all about GPA and test scores, which is not the case, as we'll see when it comes to holistic admissions. They're certainly important, however, it's just one part of the full package. And actually, I would like to take a moment now. If anyone has any questions related to more housekeeping things in terms of who we are, what our office does, I'd like to take just 2 minutes. Please feel free to type them into the little chat box. And please make sure to address them to everyone so that we can all see. Okay, well, looks like we don't have any takers at the moment, so we will be looping around periodically, though, after each segment of the presentation to ask some questions. So if you think of one, don't hesitate later. Okay, next. So what is this thing called holistic admissions? You can see both of the definitions from the AAMC and ADEA on the screen here. Go ahead, take a moment to digest that. And then we'll talk about each of these three components in order. Okay, so the goal is to really focus on each applicant, each candidate from a 360-degree angle, taking all of their relevant experiences, preparation, personal attributes into account. Let's begin our discussion by talking about academic things. This is just another way to visualize it, by the way, so showing how academic metrics, attributes, and experiences all contribute towards holistic admissions. So another big question we always get then is, so what major should I be if I'm pre-med or pre-dent? And the simple answer is you should pursue a major, whatever you're most passionate about. If you do want a little sense of typical or common majors, we do have some appointment data on the screen. The majority of pre-med, pre-dent students at UConn are in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, but we certainly have students from other schools as well. You know, we've seen a jump, I think, in the past couple of years, especially in School of Engineering, as well as Connor, Agriculture, Health, Natural Resources. And so as long as you complete the prerequisite entrance requirements for med or dent school, you can be any major you'd like to be. The most popular majors are certainly within the biological sciences, so it's a pretty even split between biological sciences, MCB, PNB. These majors tend to be quite flexible, and they do overlap very nicely with some of the pre-med, pre-dent requirements. However, on the screen, you can also see just a small sampling of some of the other majors that our students are pursuing currently at UConn who are pre-med and pre-dent. I always like to tell two little anecdotes, beginning with in 2018, our matriculant to Stanford Med was actually an English major, which I find very cool. So she had a strong passion for writing as well as music, actually, and won a research grant to record an album of piano music. But at the same time, she was able to demonstrate significant strength in the hard sciences. In addition, the former president of the Pre-Dental Society about a year ago was a history major, so also demonstrating some other competencies, passions alongside the sciences. Okay, I'm going to pull up this coursework chart. This is directly from our website, actually. I'm going to pull it up online so that it's a little bit bigger. And in the meantime, Dr. Sanford, would you like to begin introducing coursework, especially what those three big keywords at the top mean?
Okay, gotcha. So when admissions committees are given files to review and then present to the whole committee for discussion, the discussion of your academic readiness and preparedness really focuses on four basic things. And those three keywords you see: breadth, depth, and rigor, as well as individual scholarship that we'll come to a little later. But breadth, basically, they want to see a student who has explored and gotten a good, strong liberal arts education. So it's good to sort of look into what other subjects are of interest to you and to make sure you incorporate this into your plan. You know, some majors you have less room to do that just because of their multiple requirements to just meet the demands of their, specialized degree. But you work with it the best you can to at least display some degree of breadth across different areas. Very common for students to identify, sometimes even a second major or at least a minor. And we had a student this past year who had three majors and I think a couple of minors to go along with it. She just fell in love with basically everything she was doing. So, had a hard time settling on exactly what to take. So she decided to just pedal to the metal, just to explore all of the things that she was interested. So, quite a remarkable story. And it's something that often you designate a major when you come into school and you discover some areas of interest in your first semester, second semester, just by sampling, some coursework, and you see, their relevance to you in the long run in terms of preparing for a career in medicine. So, breadth is one area in particular. Depth is basically means that you've gone beyond the sort of introductory level course to, just explore in some more depth another discipline or another area of interest. So beyond the sort of 1,000 level class that you might do as a sort of entree to a particular discipline, you might get interested in a 2,000 or even 3,000, level course as you progress on through your sophomore, junior, and senior year. So schools like to see that you sort of go beyond, the basic, introductory level classes. Rigor is another kind of key concept there that they look to, and they, in the end, want to see that you've chosen a pretty challenging path in terms of your selection of interest and, degree of, depth in certain areas. And in practical terms, there are some choices you can make related to just the offerings available to you, even as part of the prerequisites that you take. And so breadth, depth, and rigor are sort of three things as they're looking at an academic record that they pay particular attention to. I would just highlight also that on one of the earlier sort of concentric rings slide, along with GPA and MCAT, there was a specific mention of grade trend. And, this is valuable to look at. I can tell you from an admissions committee perspective, there's about 7 out of 10 candidates that have some little glitch somewhere in their record. And, so if you happen to struggle with anything, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you sort of, try to identify where things didn't go, well, learn from that, and then apply it as you approach the next coursework that you're engaged in. And that's why sort of grade trend is on that list, because it does demonstrate, a student who's maybe struggled with some area and has really been able to adjust and sort of redirect study patterns or whatever that might be to really improve moving forward. So, that's an important kind of key element of that concentric sort of circle diagram you see. That's at the core of things. We also mentioned sort of majors and minors along the way, but those basic, things are important to consider. In terms of the prerequisite courses themselves, you're going to find as you start to look into different professional schools, some don't even list classes, actually. They don't even list the classes to take. They just say you have to have competency in these particular areas of biology, chemistry, physics, and others. And, for most of us, that means, going through the basic course routine that the school offers in these disciplines, but it does signal there are other ways to show competency in different subjects. It may well have been through research. It may have been through work experience you've had. Some schools are just try to get away from this notion of you have these sort of distinct classes you need to go through. But in reality, for most of the applicants, you're following the sort of basic routine, which is your biology, your chemistry, your organic chemistry, your physics. I mean, that's been the core prerequisite for professional school in medicine and dentistry for years and years and years. Things that have gotten more attention sort of on and off, and sometimes more sort of gathering momentum. They want to see a good, strong year of English. They've added, of course, some psychology and sociology, relevant to bringing more importance to, understanding the behavioral and social foundations of medicine. Statistics has also emerged as a class, that they'd like to see you have, so that you can show some, evidence and proof of, just being able to be critical of data that's presented for and against certain arguments. Math, schools historically have wanted to see a full year of calculus as part of your quantitative preparation. Nowadays, there's only about a half of the medical schools, that really fully, expect or require a year. For most students, one semester is certainly going to be adequate, and there's many, many schools that say, we're perfectly confident with one semester of calc and one semester of statistics as your sort of mathematical background presentation. But indeed, you have to have strength quantitatively as it shows up in your science classes, as well as math or stats or other classes. So that's just a little bit about the prerequisites. So Bio 1107, 1108, Chem 1127, 1128, or these sort of different sequence iterations of that you see on the list. Organic chemistry, you're going to find some differences. Many medical schools say on their websites these days, and sort of have the feeling that you're fine if you do one semester of organic chemistry with lab, followed up by a semester of biochemistry with lab. The difficulty with this is that not all schools are on the same page related to this. So we generally take the position with applicants is we really want you to prepare in the most rigorous classes offered by the university. So do still recommend you do the full organic sequence because there may be indeed some schools when you get to that stage of applying that it is going to be required that you take, the full year. Plus that, full year consisting of 3 classes, 2 lectures, and a lab is really regarded as a much more rigorous approach than the abridged organic chemistry that's offered at the university, which is perfectly fine for some other health professional areas, but again, just doesn't convey the same degree of depth or rigor compared to doing the 3 sequence stuff. Biochemistry, of course, is also essentially a requirement for all schools. Most of the schools don't teach specifically a biochemistry class anymore in medical school. They really expect you to have this coming in, and it's embedded in the course structure that they have, much of which is more case-based these days rather than sort of full discipline-oriented content lectures. So that's you have some choices along the way, but it basically boils down to those historical kinds of prerequisite classes, and then some additional upper division science, like we said, as well as psychology and psych and stats and English. Anything you'd like to add, Krista?
Thank you so much for that introduction. I think it might be the best course of action if we just take some questions now. So whatever questions you might have about either specific courses or sequencing, anything that Dr. Sanford just introduced, please type them into the chat and then I will read them out loud. I will actually just jump in and talk about English for a second because we always get this question. You'll note that it's a full year of English, and this is a very standard entrance requirement no matter what individual school you're looking at. So really meaning 2 semesters. If you took your freshman English class or if you had some kind of credit, AP or ECE credit coming in, we would count that as 1 semester. But then we do want to make sure you've just had 1 semester on the actual college campus to appease any of those more finicky schools. So that second semester can be anything you'd like it to be within the English department if you'd like to play it as safe as possible. If it has either a literature or writing component to it. One course some students have found is valuable for MCAT prep is called 2407, the short story, because of a transferable skill of digesting long passages in a given time frame, which you do need on the CAR section of the MCAT. But really just go through the catalog, see whatever jumps out at you, because that way you'll at least really enjoy it and excel in it as well. W courses can be a bit of a gray area when it comes to English, since at UConn you can have a W in any department, and the schools really want to see more of a humanities-focused class. So we do encourage you to take something from the English department with the ENGL catalog code in the title if you'd like to play it as safe as possible.
Sorry, can I ask my question right like that? Because I tried to type it and it's not, it refused to send it.
Oh, absolutely. Please go ahead.
First of all, thank you for both of you guys about this is a nice information. Thank you for teaching us about all this kind of information. My question is, it's really hard to get to the medical or dental school, and we need to wait in the waiting list, and it's really hard. People all the time told me it's really hard to get them to the medical school or dental school, and you need to wait for 1 year, 2 years until you get accepted, and that makes me a little worry if I want to just done with my L8 health program and stay waiting home until my turn is coming or until I get accepted. So I just want to make sure is this right, because you are the advisor, so the best information we can find it with you guys.
Dr. Sanford, would you like to address the question?
So let me just, if I can, repeat my understanding of the question. And a couple of responses. Schools, you get the impression schools today are looking for candidates that really take full advantage of their undergraduate time and opportunity to explore their interests. So you get the sense most of the schools are not interested in accelerated kind of programs, and they really want you to sort of dedicate the full 4 years. You also hear a lot of discussion about what is referred to generally as gap years, or taking a little extra time to get added coursework, to get added experience, to get adequate and additional service activities. So this is common today. A lot of students take the perspective that during your undergraduate years, they really want to very sort of more fully focus on their academics, and don't get involved in quite as many things as they might, just to ensure that they have dedicated themselves to making sure academically they put themselves in a good position. And schools like to see a fair amount of experience and exposure clinically. They certainly like to see a good, strong service commitment over time. They like to see research. I mean, they sort of hold all the cards. They like to see everything. So for many students, they're able to accomplish all these things within the context of their 4 years and move right into professional school. When they graduate, that means you have to sort of do the coursework, prepare, take the MCAT by the end of your 3rd year, use the time you have well and manage it well to incorporate all those other things, and you can still sort of be on track, to move directly from undergraduate into professional school and on. A lot of times students will think about this very carefully and come to a conclusion that they might well be served well by spending some additional time to get added experience in different areas, or sometimes it's a sort of strategic move to position themselves in a much better way with another sort of year to add and really show just more strength across all areas. So I think that was the gist of your question. Correct me if I haven't hit on it exactly. But, there's, a fair amount to do over a relatively short time. Rather than take the direction of cramming everything in just as quickly as you can do it, I think it's just something we try to caution you against. We hate to see students kind of shoot themselves in the foot just trying to stay on pace with other people's expectations of them. And so I think the central thing to say there is everybody has their own pace for this. And, I would just shy away from trying to do too much, too early. And you're going to be your own best judge of that, based upon how things are going, with your courses and whether, how you feel your time management is going. So I hope I've responded to the question. If not, if I've missed an element of it, let us know. Krista?
Thank you. And yes, I would just really underscore the importance of taking your time, because the professional schools are not going anywhere. And so make sure you really use your undergraduate journey to explore what makes you excited, to pursue your interests. And all of those experiences along the way will ultimately strengthen your candidacy, whatever you choose to focus on. Gaining more clinical experience or research, doing strongly in your academics. So to kind of paraphrase Dr. Sanford, we do have applicants who apply every year after their junior year to begin med school right after they graduate, and they are accepted. But we have other students who might not get in the first time around, but then they really take some time, evaluate what was most lacking or which areas they need to strengthen, and they do very well the second time around.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we did have a couple questions, namely one about transfer credit. So just to say that out loud, when you do apply to medical or dental school, you will have to send official transcripts from any and all colleges where you've ever taken college level coursework. So the schools are going to see grades no matter what, even if the credit is only listed as T on your UConn transcript. When it comes to your core sciences with labs, we do really recommend you take them at your home institution at UConn. But some of the other courses, such as English or the social sciences or even calculus, for example, it's not so important where you take them if you need to take them elsewhere. For the other guys, though, the sciences with labs, really try to take those during the regular academic semester at UConn, or if not, then at least at another 4-year degree granting institution. What other questions do you have? Please don't be shy.
Yeah, excuse me, how many years the study of the dental program will take? 6 years, 8 years, and how about the medical school? I'm new to the country. I just came 4 years ago. I'm coming from Jordan, so I'm learning English here and try to be in the medical schools. I'm sorry for my language. I know sometimes people not understand my idea, but I try.
No worries. Actually, I've worked with many international students at UConn. So, Dr. Sanford, would you like to answer about the typical length of professional school?
Sure, and don't be shy about being from a little different language or culture. Krista spent a number of years in Japan. Just to highlight some of her unique strengths and what she brings to the whole university. So, bottom line, the way the U.S. System does this, students go to college. It's typically 4 years. Some students sort of fast track that a little bit and are able to do it in 3 years. Then you go on to professional school in the United States. Medical school is basically 4 years and dental school is 4 years. Students, after they do and complete dental school, usually go on to 1 year of residency before they then go out to establish a practice or to pursue other additional specialties or fellowships. It's actually, in many states, you can go right from dental graduation to practicing dental medicine. So there isn't as protracted a graduate school trajectory for many. It depends upon what you're interested in and what your schedule is for completion of that particular specialty or discipline. But it's usually 4 years of dental school, a year of residency, sometimes as a fellowship for a year or two. But you're into your professional career a little more directly compared to medical school. Medical school is basically 4 years of residency for most residencies. One thing to sort of say related to that, however, is that through our history as a country, there have been times where medical school has actually been truncated to 3 years. This was particularly evident during the wars in order to actually prepare students to move out into their professional directions earlier. And over the years, there have been different types of programs set up to try to accomplish residency in 3 years rather than 4 years. But so that's the basic standard. And there are some schools now that have approached this notion of trying to provide incentives for people to go into primary care and to go into underserved areas where some of their medical school tracks, they do post as 3 years. And if you make an agreement to also do residency with them, along with an agreement to practice in an underserved area of their state, you can do residency in 3 years. So rather than thinking of 8 years in terms of preparation for medicine, there are some instances where a 6-year kind of program puts you in through the sort of educational pipeline in practicing. So these are things that you sort of approach a little later. That's something you need to sort of think through a lot right now, other than to say, there are different kinds of programs, that sort of are available based upon certain special interests you may have. Some of the medical schools have specialized tracks even in their own just medical school program. So when you are applying, you actually apply for a sub-track within the same school. And, the pedagogy often is a little different. Where you actually spend your time and energy in clinical activities is different. So there's quite a lot of variety, that's there that really is associated with issues of healthcare needs and where they are and how we can best prepare people to go in those directions. And certain schools, just because they have a specialization or have made it a specialization for them, you have these areas to begin to make some choices about. A lot of times students are not at the level when they're applying to medical school that they really sort of sorted that out. And for most schools, they don't expect you to have sorted that out by that time. And it's really during medical school when you're get exposed to all the different clinical areas is where you end up sort of focusing your energies. And, that decision about where you choose eventually to focus your energies in a specific discipline, often comes about by, where you go to medical school, the kinds of clinical experiences you have there, the kinds of faculty you interact with that may be very, charismatic about recruiting, students to their own particular specialty. So there's a lot of forces that come into play. And, just again, thinking back to medical school time spent with admissions in Farmington, all those things came into play in part in redirecting students who maybe thought they were initially headed toward one, discipline. Typically you get sort of excited about where you do your shadowing, where you do your volunteer work, so hone into particular populations that you serve, and you feel that, that's where your experience is at that point. When you get to medical school, you're the kid in the candy store again, and you have so much opportunity available, and it opens your mind. So it's very common for a student to change their mind 3 times, at least, in medical school as they go through these added experiences. So the answer to the question is there are some very kind of targeted, directed programs for students who feel they have, assessed that and their interest and can get directed a little bit early, but most everybody sort of falls into that later category of, just kind of, you need to move ahead and grow from the experiences that you have in medical school, before you sort of zero in too much on one thing or another.
Thank you. And just in the interest of time, we're going to keep moving now. However, if you're not aware, the U.S. does have a slightly unique approach to medical and dental school in terms of timing. Most countries in the world don't do it this way, so please, do a little searching on the internet to find out more about what the rest of the world does. It's quite interesting. So just to wrap up a couple things about coursework and academics, we usually like to discuss any kind of incoming credit you might have in terms of either AP or ECE with you during individual appointments, just to get a sense of, your individual circumstances. There's just a couple things you want to keep in mind. Some of the schools can get a little finicky if you bring in too much credit, for example. So, if you have any concerns or just want to talk it over with an advisor, please make an appointment with one of us. In addition, just to keep on your radar, or if you're not aware, we do have a couple special offerings here at UConn. So in addition to advising, writing composite letters, Dr. Sanford does typically teach a few courses per semester. The one that's offered every semester is called Patient and the Healer. That's in the P&B department. It's a rare 2-credit course at UConn. So it meets for a couple hours once per week, typically in the evenings. And that course teaches you how to take a patient's medical history as well as conduct a mock examination. So that's always a very popular course and is directly applicable to skills you will be learning in medical school. Other examples of courses he teaches are Intro to Physical Examination and Health of Communities. All of these courses do require special permission. If that's something you're interested in, we do have a request form up on our website for Patient and the Healer, which opens 1 week prior to course registration every semester. So please make sure to submit it there. I will say that all spots for the spring course have been filled. So if that's something you're interested in taking in the fall, just be sure to check back on the website well in advance. In addition, UConn does offer an EMT course actually on campus for academic credit. The catalog code is Allied Health AH4092, and it's a partnership the department has with Hartford Hospital. So you can get 4 credits for your time, which is very nice. You know, the one potential downside is it just is a very big time commitment during the semester. It typically meets for about 4 hours on Monday and Wednesday evenings, as well as 8 hours on Saturdays. The contact person for that course is Dr. Susan Gregoire in the Allied Health Sciences Department, if anyone is interested. In addition, our office does offer an MCAT course typically every spring semester, so not the fall, but in the spring. It's typically spread over 11 weeks, and each week focuses on different content and how it's actually utilized to reflect the type of questions asked on the MCAT. We will begin advertising for this coming spring course sometime after Thanksgiving, so just make sure you're paying attention to the weekly newsletter. We have the schedule, the instructors all set up at this point, but just working out a couple final details. All right, and with that, I would like to now transition to the next big topic related to holistic admissions, which is all these different experiences you also want to cultivate alongside taking the required courses. So we'll talk a little bit, a mix of both clinical experiences, things such as research, independent scholarship, and then just becoming involved in extracurriculars or service in general. So let's begin with clinical experiences, or you might also hear us talk about them as medically related experiences. In our office, we like to break these into 2 big areas of both shadowing and direct patient care experience. So I like to think of them as 2 sides of the same coin because they're both important. Schools like to see both kinds of experiences, and they both provide you with different insights and skills. Shadowing is usually the logical place for students to start. When you shadow a physician or dentist, another healthcare provider, that shows that you've really tried the profession out, you know what you're getting into, and then the schools know you're going to be committed to this pathway moving forward. The schools don't usually put numbers to this. However, we found that our most successful applicants do have roughly about 50 to 75 hours of shadowing, ideally split between 2 to 3 different specialties of medicine, if possible, just to gain some diverse perspectives. So that's a great next step. I would just mention or caution that at this moment in the current pandemic environment, shadowing is probably the #1 hardest thing to obtain. And so schools are not going to fault anyone for not being able to obtain this at the moment. It might be best to shift focus to some other things for the time being, but just keep it in the back of your mind. There are such things as virtual shadowing experiences too. But ultimately, it would be valuable to get some in-person experiences to check out doctor-patient interaction at some point down the road. Now, the flip side of the coin is direct patient care experience. So this is something which is qualified by either you having one-on-one interaction with patients and or you're the one administering the healthcare in some form. So it's more of an active, hands-on kind of experience. There are many, many different routes you can go about to cultivate this. A few of them are listed on the screen there, so including very formalized training routes, such as obtaining an EMT or a CNA, Certified Nursing Assistant license. Other forms of training include becoming a medical assistant or a medical scribe, which has become actually a very popular growth year type activity, learning phlebotomy, for example. Or it could be through a form of volunteer work if you do have that regular patient interaction. So, for example, volunteering at a fairly typical hospital volunteer program or at a local elder care facility where you live, those would all qualify as direct patient care type experiences. We do recommend, we see our most successful applicants have a minimum 100 hours of this. However, many of them do go well above and beyond. Also, just to put a quick note in, to put it on your radar, there is a fairly new program called UConn Health Leaders, which is based at the Health Center in Farmington, Connecticut, which is where UConn Med and Dent are located. And this is a pretty cool program. It blends elements of both clinical and service, along with a focus on the social determinants of health. And so you would gain experience screening patients for these different areas, as well as completing some direct professional development in the form of modules, which are mainly taken from UConn Med's curriculum. So I just mentioned this because their next application deadline is coming up on November 25th. If you're interested, you can just Google UConn Health Leaders Program. You should find their website and their application. Check it out, see if it looks interesting to you. Dr. Sanford, what would you like to talk about related to clinical, medically related experience?
Yeah, I would just echo, Krista's breakdown of those things. What the admissions committee, was looking, for, again, when they pick up applications to look at them for review, is that you at least have taken the time to invest in understanding the roles and responsibilities of the profession that you're thinking of going into. So, shadowing is valuable in that, it's sort of more of a passive activity. You're sort of laying back, observing. But the more you do this, the more the health providers engage you in discussion about, what you see, what kind of data you gather, what does it all mean? How do you make sense of it all? How do you sort of get efficient about thinking about it and zeroing in on health issues and problems that need to be addressed? So, it has it's a great opportunity to just see the sort of the mind in action of individuals that are charged with the care of other people and all the various considerations they have to take into account. It also allows you to see some differences in the way people organize themselves, organize the data. It allows you to see different stylistic approaches to a patient. And sometimes you end up being actually quite critical of different hacks and just procedures and degree to which health providers sort of focus on helping to develop the relationship further, so that there is a greater degree of connection, a greater degree of trust, that just becomes a part of that experience. So, and it allows you to see different disciplines in medicine and how that sort of shapes and focuses the kinds of connections and communications that are, needed and necessary. And you also get to see how efficient, people actually end up getting as they practice this more and more. From an admissions committee perspective, again, they just want to make sure that you've taken the time and effort and energy to really appreciate and understand, just what you're going to be doing in your professional career. One question I always ask students as they come into the patient and healer class, how many patient interviews do you think you're going to do over the course of your lifetime in medicine? And, sometimes, I'll maybe do 1,000. I thought, yeah, you'll do 1,000 for sure. And, you're going to do a couple of 100,000, of these. So it's something you got to think about. It's something you got to get really good at. And at the same time, you have to always sort of have the patient first in mind, and they have to walk out of your interview. They have to walk out of that connection really feeling that you were the primary focus of their time and effort and energy. The good clinicians, when you talk to patients after they come out of what we considered a really excellent interview, and you ask them the question, well, how long did you actually spend the time talking with the doctor or the dentist, and how much of the time was talking to sort of other members of the team, other members of the staff? And for people that are really good at this, it's almost maybe they spend about half the time that you think that you've spent with them, because again, they're just so efficient and excellent about communicating with you, really zeroing in on the patient's problems and interests, that you really, as a patient, feel they're spending a lot more time with you than it actually shows up, and if you're sort of timing it out. So these are skill bases that you learn as you move along. You get more efficient as you do more and more, and you learn through experience. So this is critical. The other point to make is outside of it, sort of recognizing the importance of it being kind of a passive experience and then interpreting and gathering a lot of experience and judgment about those interactions that you're seeing. They actually want you to experience some time, with patients. I can tell you a lot of people have a very idealized view of medicine. You think you're going to go in, every day to practice and save lives, and everybody's going to be so happy and thrilled with how things have gone, and be so immediately sort of respectful and thankful for your time. It doesn't work that way all the time, and these are also things you have to think about. So again, the notion of having you put yourself in a position where you're actually talking with, caring for patients, even if it's in a sort of very sort of modest activities of daily living way, or just to be a companion or an advocate for some time with them. It really does talk to the schools and conveys to the schools, yes, you put in the time and effort to really understand and appreciate what you're going after. So we'll stop there, Kristen.
Thank you. So actually, Dr. Sanford, would you like to introduce the next section about research independent scholarship, and then I'll point out some resources afterwards. And let me follow up with the usual question about if I'm interested in starting to get involved in research, what should I be researching?
Sure. Thank you. So again, one of the sort of academic things schools are looking for, in addition to breadth, depth, and rigor, is degree of independent scholarship. So again, this is not normally stated as a formal requirement for many schools, but when you think about these institutions and how they've developed, how their reputation is shaped, there is very often a very strong research component, to it, that the people who are there, who are part of the institutional structure and their missions, research is very often a key element. Not true of all of the schools, but certainly a great many. So it never hurts to get involved in research, to appreciate and understand what that whole process is, and that you can sort of personally relate to it through some experience. As Krista indicated, it doesn't really, you don't have to have specific kinds of research. If your interests are more in sociological studies, if your interest is more in sort of comparing effective treatment modalities clinically, if your interest is in more basic bench research, any of these sort of meet the goal of showing some inquisitiveness, showing that you're a very careful and critical thinker, that you take a wonderfully thorough approach to looking into and developing a research question. So we just advise you to explore any areas of interest you have. And some students get excited again in a couple of different areas, and you find them committing some time to a thesis related to a bench project they've been involved with. And you'll find folks that are, doing clinical kind of trials work, investigating different, treatment efficacies. And then you've got some students doing history. If you're a history major and you're doing a sort of honors thesis related to history, I mean, that counts just as much. demonstrates an inquisitiveness, a thoroughness, a carefulness in sort of critical thinking and critical analysis of your own work. And what's the next step, beyond what you have done in getting a clear understanding of a research question. So it is valuable, and Krista has a number of things she'll highlight here.
Thank you. So I would like to share a little bit of information about one of our sister units and enrichment programs called Office of Undergraduate Research, or OUR for short, because they're really the best starting place if you are thinking about becoming involved in research in the near future. So first of all, this office offers information sessions every semester, which are conveniently called Getting Started in Undergraduate Research. I think they might have one more. Oh, in fact, it is taking place shortly after the conclusion of this presentation at 12:15 today, if you're able to join. They do have some of their handouts right here on the website, as well as a really great Getting Started guide under the Students tab. So please check that out, because usually research comes about by you first exploring what your own interests might be, whatever those are in whatever department, and then trying to forge some connections with faculty who are doing things you're really interested in or get excited about. This website even, they have everything, including sample email templates that you can refer to when sending emails to faculty about potentially getting involved in research. So that's one really great thing OUR does. Another one is that they provide tons of funding opportunities for students. And so there's a whole long list of them here, but just to point out a couple ones that pre-meds, pre-dents make particular use of, I would highlight the SURF grants, so Summer Undergraduate Research Fund, which you can receive if you're doing research at any of the UConn campuses over the summer, as well as the IDEA grants, which are really cool. You can get up to $4,000 to pursue some kind of completely student-driven creative idea, project, endeavor, which is all of your own making. And lastly, the Health Research Program is a very cool program, which is also based at the Health Center in Farmington, Connecticut, where as an undergraduate, you're actually conducting research in the faculty's labs there. It's a full-time thing over the summer. The different labs all are looking for different things, and so I don't see that they have their summer 2021 positions up here on the website yet. But if that's something you're interested in applying to, just keep checking back on this website. The application deadline will be February 1st, 2021. All right. So that was a little introduction to Research Independent Scholarship. Finally, let's take a few moments to focus on extracurriculars and service in general. And so we talked a little bit about how it's important to just do things that you're passionate about. The med and dent schools do want to see what makes you excited as a person. And so many different ways to do this outside of the classroom. You could get involved in one of the over 700 student orgs at UConn at any of the campuses, or UConn Community Outreach would be a great starting place as well if you really want to cultivate that service thread. By the way, there is going to be a link in this presentation for ideas to do during the pandemic. You'll be able to click that once the slides are uploaded on our website. So let's highlight a couple of those student orgs and why you might want to get involved. Many of the student orgs on campus are quite active, and they provide all kinds of informational support, professional development to students, along with other experiential opportunities such as alternative breaks, and are a great place to ultimately cultivate some leadership roles down the road. So we have listed here some of the major, more medically related student groups alongside this slide. So I would say the three big overarching ones are really listed at the top here. And then as you further, hone in on what your specific interests are, you might check out some of the other ones. MAPS listed fourth from the top here. They've been very active this semester. They've had a couple fantastic alumni panels especially, as well as kidney disease screening awareness, UConn Rescue for current or aspiring EMTs, Global Brigades, MedLife all take international service trips. And so you can check out a full listing of all student orgs at ucontact.uconn.edu. I would draw your attention to the picture in the upper right here. So this is one of my favorite stories about a group of, it was a couple years ago, sophomores who decided they wanted to create their own student org by combining their love for medicine with knitting. So they created a new student org called Knit for NICU. And at this point, they have partnerships with at least 3 local hospitals. They drop off shipments of hand-knitted beanies, blankets, other objects. And so that's been a really rewarding experience for them. So, you know, you can always create your own club too if something currently here doesn't appeal to you. In addition, just to highlight some of our regional campus student orgs, all of which have a great number of pre-med, pre-dent students. You can see some of these on the screen as well. Okay, and then finally, let me just share UConn Community Outreach. So if you are hoping to get involved in service, Community Outreach is a really great starting place. They are in charge of all the one-time, semester-long, alternative break type service opportunities, including a whole chunk of healthcare-related programs. So if you go to our programs and then semester-long, let me just highlight a couple of them. So beginning with Collegiate Health Service Corps, this is a group that works with a lot of underserved populations in the areas and provide everything from public health awareness, outreach. They might take vitals of some people, but a lot of students have found this is a very rewarding way to be involved. In addition, the Mansfield Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation is actually technically within walking distance of campus if you'd like to engage with that particular community. Windham Hospital is a local hospital just one town over from UConn's main Shores campus, so they have a fairly typical volunteering site program partnered with community outreach. And the Senior Center is also very close to the Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation. One of the great things about community outreach, by the way, is that they do provide the transportation for you. So especially if you're a freshman or sophomore, are not able to have a car on campus yet, you just hop into their van, they shuttle you back and forth to the sites. So that's great. And of course, community outreach also has a ton of other programs, you know, depending what your interests are. So if you have a passion for working with children, for example, or adolescents, you know, check out some of their Big Buddies type programs and or after school tutoring, tons of language and literacy. I will personally put a plug in promoting a group called Cross-Cultural Connections, connecting with international students at the university and helping develop English language skills. Okay. And this is not to say, by the way, that you can't be doing service in other areas too. So many students are involved in service in some kind of a local community program wherever you're currently residing. If you're involved in a religious community, oftentimes there's a big service element to those. So, you know, it doesn't have to be through UConn, but it is important to stay engaged. Okay. Now, lastly, the third big element of the holistic admissions that we would like to focus on is to introduce this thing called the core competencies. And so you've probably at some point heard the term transferable skills or soft skills in many different forums, but the Association of American Medical Colleges has their own list of 15 core competencies, which they find really successful medical school students and practitioners embody. So these are the kinds of skills, knowledge, personal attributes that are really important and intrinsic to being a physician or dentist. They're roughly grouped into these 4 big areas. And if you click these links later on, you can also see plenty of examples of real-life stories, how students embody these, along with some guides to help you start reflecting on what your personal strengths are. So I've listed the 15 competencies just very simply on this slide, but if you just Google them, 15 core competencies, AAMC, you'll find them along with greater descriptions of them. And we can, I suppose we can highlight a few. So Dr. Sanford, would you like to highlight a few that the admissions committees really particularly look at these days?
Yeah, if you just work from the top down there, most schools, when they get files, they have a matrix that they have their admissions committee members fill out as they're asked to review files. And services also is typically one of the #1 things. You look at many of the individual school descriptions, and you often see the average number of service hours, anywhere from 3 to sort of 500. Each school sort of records those things a little differently and gives credit for some different things. So, it's hard to know, just exactly what one particular school is sort of does over another, but just appreciate the importance of the service orientation that you have, and the amount of time and effort and sort of true engagement that you've shown in things of interest to you, or what they're excited about, what they're interested in. I have a bunch of guest speakers come, physician guest speakers come in to talk during my classes about preparation for medicine and to develop the skills. Dr. Decker's former dean of the School of Medicine, I worked with for many, many years, still actually practices surgery, does surgery in his retirement. He talks about, things that you really need to develop during medical school. You do have to develop a knowledge base in pathophysiology, which happens for the most part, when you're in medical school, and you develop that very significantly second year, third year, fourth year, before you then move on to residency. But, that's all doable. It's a lot of information. Things that are really important get stressed time and time again during medical school. So you do have repeated opportunities to learn and build a sufficient knowledge base. He says skills can be taught, the basic skills you need to do physical examinations, your particular, specialty and discipline will train you in the sort of use of those tools and equipment that do require some, skill development to administer tests, or something that's sort of, for the most part, they consider to be easily, taught. You have to practice it. You have to get good at it. One of the things they say in sort of learning auscultation, in medical school, how many times do you have to actually listen to heart sounds before you can actually tell, what you're hearing? Estimate at about 350 to 400 times before you really become an expert at it. But again, skills can be taught and learned. He stresses a lot communications. He attributes his own success really, and most physicians you talk to attribute their success to really just having developed exceptional communication skills. So these are the things that schools really do, focus on and emphasize. Cultural competency and sort of teamwork and team-oriented activities have, in more recent years, I think, have received much, much more attention and will continue to do so. So, the question you ask yourself when you go to look at these competencies, you say, well, what evidence do I have to show that I am developing skills in this area? And, think carefully about that and think of things that you can get involved with that will help you, demonstrate that to a great extent. All the other things you see there are certainly part of what they are looking for when they evaluate and look at candidates, but would draw particular attention to those top few there.
Thank you. And it is really important to begin reflecting on these earlier. It'll just make it that much easier for you to articulate your motivation and your strengths for medicine when it's time to actually apply. So that's why we do like to introduce these very early on, so that as you move forward in your undergraduate journey, you're constantly checking back in, reflecting on what your areas of strength are. I would also say that, there's no one way to demonstrate each area. So this is where you can use a little creative thinking. For example, teamwork. So you might, when you think teamwork, you might think, well, maybe that means I have to be in part of a sports team or a soccer club at the university. And that's absolutely a fine way to demonstrate that. But also think maybe if you're part of a research lab and you work with other undergrads, grad students, postdocs, faculty, you each have your assigned role to play and you each work collaboratively as part of a team. So another one we've been talking about, especially over the last half year, is the resilience and adaptability, I think for multiple reasons. And so even directly from UConn Med, the admissions office has said the most important thing at this moment is to just be engaged in some way, find some kind of creative solution to be doing something in the midst of the pandemic, even if you can't gain particular experiences during this time. Okay, so, and all that to say, because as a professional, you will have to encounter roadblocks every single day. And so it's important for the schools to know that when faced with a challenge, how are you going to overcome that? Okay, so to summarize the holistic admissions review, we've talked about academics, we've talked about experiences such as gaining clinical, research, or just extracurricular activities, as well as the core competencies. Just a couple more things to touch on now. So just to mention about a typical timeline. If you are hoping to begin med or dent school right after you graduate that fall, just be aware that means you will be applying to professional school then the summer after your junior year. Okay, so it's very far in advance, especially compared to undergraduate admissions. And when I say summer, I do really mean summer. The applications open in early summer, and the schools operate on a rolling admissions basis. So it is to your advantage to get your materials in earlier so that it's reviewed earlier on. 60% of applicants these days, according to AAMC data, do take a little extra time now. So take that growth year or two. That doesn't mean you would graduate any later, but it would give you your entire senior year to be finishing up coursework, gaining experiences, and then essentially applying right after you graduate and then doing something during that interim year in the meantime to continue strengthening your candidacy. So just to walk you through a typical timeline though, your freshman year, it's a good thing to focus on academics. To quote Dr. Sanford, be a little bit of a nerd and just make sure you settle into college, focus on doing well, adjusting, seek out resources if you need a little help in any area, and then explore some options outside of the classroom. So you don't necessarily have to commit to anything right away, but just try out some different clubs, try out some different service opportunities, maybe see what gets you really excited. And then that way, moving into sophomore year, you can hone in on a few that you want to stay committed to on a really regular basis, ideally over an extended time. So we do talk about this idea of quality over quantity as well. You know, it's just much more meaningful to be involved in even a couple things, but things that you do on a really regular basis, as opposed to doing a smattering of things. We call it the checkbox mentality, and the schools can really see that right away. Okay, then the summer after your freshman year is a great time to really focus on those more experiential aspects if you haven't already, look into some different opportunities. Sophomore year as well, continue focusing on academics, staying involved, and then the summer after sophomore year as well, focus on other areas, maybe something you haven't gotten around to yet. Junior year would be important to wrap up some of those last prereqs, including the really critical biochemistry course. Students typically take that either 5th or 6th semester. And then if you are on the timeline of wanting to apply to school right after your junior year, you would be taking the MCAT sometime either that spring or early summer, most likely, DAT as well. We just recommend as an office that if you're applying on that timeline, you take it no later than mid to late July, purely for timing reasons. That's around the time we'd be submitting your applications as well. And then moving into senior year, you would just be waiting to hear back from schools about interviews, typically hearing anywhere from, mid to late August right through February, actually. Okay, just that question pop up. Is this process timeline any different for students hoping to apply into MD, PhD programs? Not really. You would still be submitting the same application, and AMCAS, which is the name of essentially the common app for MD programs, it would ask you 2 additional essay type questions. So one just about what is your motivation for applying to this kind of combined program, and then 2, what is your research background? And so, just depending on when you hope to matriculate, you would want to focus on really strengthening that research thread during your studies. I will point out as well, Once these slides are up on the website, you can check out the official timelines from both of the medical and dental educational associations for more information about those. And then in addition, hopefully you're aware of these UConn resources at this point. So the Q Center offers tutoring in some of the basic STEM courses, as well as the W Center for writing, and they do personal statement review, by the way. In addition, the Center for Career Development offers everything from personal statement review as well to mock interviews. And the Academic Achievement Center is a great resource if you find yourself having a really hard time adjusting to college or need to focus on exam taking strategies, time management skills, things such as that. So I know we're right at our time now. I would like to ask Dr. Sanford to jump in to give a little closing, give some closing remarks, please.
Okay, again, Krista, thank you so much for getting us together to, just convey, what our office does. We consider our strengths to be our people, number one, the resources available to you in the university, from sort of academics to research to, all the different offices that look to give you a very extensive experience in preparation that is accessible to you. It does require you to be proactive. It does require you to sort of decide on some goals and objectives for your undergraduate experience that cross all these lines that we've talked about, in terms of academics, research, clinical experience, service activities. Look to develop yourself all across all these dimensions is the most important sort of message I think that we can give as part of this presentation and introductory. There's a lot to do for sure. You can't end up doing everything, so you do have to make some thoughtful, careful choices along the way. Again, your involvement in sort of the intensity and focus of your choices of how you spend your time and energy is what you'll, in the end, come to feel best about. If you just sort of go through this with its sort of checklist mentality again, they want to see an hour of this, hour of this, hour of this, it's not going to be fulfilling to you. It's not going to be recognized as fulfilling to the schools. So, experiment a little bit, find those things that speak most directly to you, and engage and make a good, strong contribution there. Schools are looking for happy people, very service-oriented, people that, do have some set goals and missions they'd like to accomplish in choosing a health provider role like this. So just give some careful, thought to your goals and objectives. Try to sort of lay those out in a way that you can move ahead to start, just gaining a good record and accomplishment in them as you progress through your time at the school. So again, we're here to serve you, and please connect with us. The other highlight I would say to draw some attention to is use this time to cultivate some relationships, with faculty and other staff. Members may be connected with different service opportunities because there's just a wealth of people and a wealth of interest to tap into, at the university. In the end, you want to be able to have cultivated some good, strong relationships with faculty that you've really connected with them as people as well as, with instructors who are sort of expert in their own areas. So all those things are valuable, and we'll just thank you for tuning in today. Please be safe yourself and be safe to others as you move ahead. Certainly enjoy the holiday with your family, and indeed stay connected with us. Thanks, Krista. Thanks, everyone.
That's right. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and please don't hesitate to make an appointment now. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you.